Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell.
A slender girl whirled through the hospitable open doors. She skipped the greeting and announced her hostess, who was not inferior to her in terms of figure. Adriana, get dressed quickly. In half an hour we'll begin viewing, and we still have to get there. Hey, Kelly, what are you doing? What screening? Where are we going? The guest, almost jumping from impatience, she actively gestured, as if trying to give her friend the necessary acceleration, and snidely interrogated. What viewing? Couldn't you ask anything smarter? Well, not cooking, dancing, of course. Let's move, there's less and less time left. Why are you so slow today, and don't you look fresh? All the more reason to get a move on. Express mask on your face or something. The hostess sighed and tried to explain the reason for her fatigue. Energetic Kelly and politely declined to participate in the viewing. Sorry, I'd rather rest at home. Grandma's not feeling well. My blood pressure in the morning was off the charts by the time I got home. I even had to call an ambulance. Just the other day, the general practitioner came by and wrote a bunch of tests that need to be taken. Tomorrow, I'll call a field lab for Grandma so she doesn't have to go to the clinic. So, Kelly, let me wish you luck, and I'll keep my fingers crossed for you. The guest twisted at the temple, showing that she thinks about her interlocutor. Are you trying to set me up, Adriana? I sent a video of our doubles performance to the preliminaries. After I got the message that I liked the dance, I submitted an official application to participate in the section of dance duets. A duet is two people. If I suddenly appear on stage alone, then maybe my number the jury will not even look at. Urgently looking for a partner is also a doubtful event. Adriana did not restrain her indignation and asked her friend directly. Shouldn't you have asked me if I want to perform and fight with competitors for unknown reasons? Seeing that Adriana was not giving in to flattery, Kelly changed her tone to a belittling one. Adriana, please, please, please. I don't ask you to do anything that often. You are our crowning program. Even if I wake you up in the middle of the night, you will do it perfectly. You and I are a perfect team. I can't find such a talented partner, even if I search for several years, especially since we have a little over 2 o'clock before the screening starts. An older woman came out of the room and said hello to the guest. Kelly, good afternoon. Hello, Miranda. Adriana perked up. Grandma, what's wrong? Are you not feeling well? The woman shook her head. I'm fine, Adriana. You've heard the doctor say that you should move around a little if your blood pressure is more or less within normal limits. I've just measured 130 over 95. It'll come down a bit, and you can go into space. I'll go to the kitchen and make some tea. The guest decided to influence her friend's grandmother and spoke. Miranda, how are you feeling? Maybe I can get some medicine while Adriana is getting ready? The woman smiled. Oh, Kelly, you were a foxy little fox, and you're still a foxy little fox. You don't need to go anywhere to get medicine. I've got everything I need. I'm sorry, girls, but I overheard bits of your conversation, but I wasn't listening. So why don't you tell me where you need Adriana to go so urgently? Kelly's voice sounded pitiful, almost tearful. To watch the dance competition, Miranda. It's practically a matter of life and death for me, and Adriana refuses. The woman looked carefully at Kelly, who folded her arms in a belittling gesture, shifted her gaze to her granddaughter, and looked her in the eye and asked, Sweetie, you should probably get some rest. I have tortured you with my old age illnesses. So girls, let's go and drink tea. I'm sure this won't be the last contest we'll have. Kelly knew it was useless to argue with her grandmother. The girl obediently dropped her shoes and headed to the bathroom to wash her hands. However, knocking in the palms of her hands fragrant foam, the girl did not stop thinking of arguments that would help to force her friend to keep her company at the contest. Sitting down at her long-established seat at the table at her best friend's house, Kelly turned to her grandmother again. "Miranda, you see, this contest isn't the most ordinary or passable. Winning it will be a chance to change your life. You see, even though it's a regional contest, the winners get to go to Paris. Frankly speaking, I understand that at the qualifying stage you have to shine so much to stand out from the crowd of talents. And then there will be training, and during it you will be able to work out the movement almost to perfection. The main thing for me is to pass the first round, but without Adriana it will be much more difficult to do it. Especially since I sent in my dude application. I apologize. I didn't consult her. It's my mistake, I admit. But I was acting with the best of intentions." Adriana grumbled, but not in a mean way. "You could have at least asked my opinion over the phone. We're in touch all the time, and you haven't even hinted at it once." Feeling that her friend was not angry, but grumbling only because she was a little hurt by her arbitrary decision to participate in the contest, Kelly continued her persuasion. "Miranda, Adriana has nothing to lose by going to this screening. She'll have the pleasure of dancing, practicing, warming up. If she doesn't catch fire with the idea, doesn't want to compete anymore, she may not participate in the project. I promise that after successfully passing the qualifying round, I will not insist on anything. I'll swear on anything. I just want to pass the screening. Please, Miranda, let Adriana come with me. Look how much better she looks already. The blush on her cheeks from the tea. Adriana, help me out." The girl turned to her friend. The persistent Kelly knew how to persuade. Adriana trembled and looked at her grandmother and asked, "Are you actually feeling okay? Or are you just trying to make me feel better?" The woman smiled. "I'm really fine." "Go, my soul, get ready, get some rest." Kelly clapped her hands and ran up to hug her friend's grandmother. "Thank you, Miranda. You are awesome. The coolest grandma in the world. Oh, Foxy." The woman smiled, and while her granddaughter was getting ready, began to ask her guest about her family's well-being. Soon Adriana announced to her friend that she was ready and the girls headed to the casting. They decided not to spend money on a cab. On the way to the place of the contest, Adriana involuntarily thought about the fact that, no matter how it was, it could not be otherwise. After all, how could she refuse her best friend, with whom they shared the joys and problems of more than half of their lives? The girls met at a children's sports camp. They were in different squads and almost did not communicate. But having gone through a curious situation, they became best friends. It was a passion for dancing that first became a reason for heightened competition and later brought them closer together. On the level of prosperity, parents' girls were about the same level and could afford to pay for an expensive hobby. Adriana and Kelly studied in prestigious choreographic studios in the city, but in different neighborhoods, and went to training with sincere pleasure. During the summer vacation, both girls missed their favorite activity. So when a talent contest was announced at the camp, they decided to participate. Of course, each of them prepared to perform a dance number. The camp management provided a place for practicing to all comers, of which, however, there was not much. The time when they opened a separate one-story building with a hall and a stage was limited. So unwillingly, the participants knew quite well what their opponents would emphasize. Not to say that Kelly practiced in her choreography studio, but she jealously noted when performing some elements, she is far from Adriana. In addition, practiced rivals with full dedication, even outside of rehearsals. Adriana was immersed in her thoughts. She walked along the paths for a long time, then stopped, wrote something in a small notebook, and went on. No matter how hard Kelly tried, she could not see what Adriana was writing down. The day of the contest came very quickly. There was literally no empty space in the hall. After all, to be honest, there was not much entertainment in the camp. According to the draw, Adriana was chosen to perform right after the magician, who opened the talent parade. Going on stage, the girl brilliantly began her performance with a familiar song. However, when the first lines of the second verse were heard from the speakers, the music stopped. There was silence in the hall. Only the girl on the stage acted as if nothing had happened and continued her dance. She managed to look into the hall as before, so it seemed that she looked into the soul of every spectator. Adriana's lips were moving slightly. Apparently, she did not hum the song loudly after all, helping herself not to get lost in the dance. It was fantastically beautiful. The silence was suddenly broken by a lone voice from somewhere from the last rows, singing the popular lines aloud. Then other spectators joined the unknown soloist. Soon almost the entire hall, including not only teenagers but also a large part of the staff, was singing the familiar lines. One of the contestants, who was standing with a guitar backstage waiting for his exit, began to play the melody on the instrument. As she spoke, Adriana made several deep curtsies to each side of the room, as if there were important people there, as well as to her unintentional accompanist from backstage. Smiling, she sent air kisses to everyone, and at that moment the applause rang out. As a result, the first prize was awarded to Adriana. The silver prize winner was a young man who played guitar perfectly and won many hearts. The honorable third place went to Kelly. She didn't seem to be upset. She found the strength to congratulate those who had beaten her. Thanking the jury and the audience, that same night, after eliminations, Kelly went to Adriana's cabin and called her in to talk. The winner did not refuse. At Kelly's suggestion, they retreated to the dining room so that, she said, they could not be overheard by nosy neighbors, and sat down on a bench. The silence lingered, and Adriana asked, "What did you want? Speak quickly, because I'm tired. I'm falling off my feet." "Anyway, I just wanted to admire your performance. You were great, you were great. You handled an unconventional situation very well. You didn't get confused and danced everything without a hitch." Adriana was pleased with the praise from a peer who knew about dancing, and she confessed, "In general, this merit is not entirely mine. Our coach once told us that at any level of competition we should be ready for anything." She gave an example of how once at the World Figure Skating Championships in the early 70s, one of the pairs performing was in a terrible situation. The musical accompaniment, while performing the program, simply turned off. However, the skaters with a squeak, cutting the ice with their skates, continued to perform the elements as if nothing had happened. The secret was that they were practicing with a metronome at the insistence of their coach. The whole pattern of the dance, or I don't remember exactly how they call the sequence of elements, was subordinated to a strict rhythm, calculated by seconds, and the absence of music in the middle of the performance was not a disaster. It was certainly much more difficult for them than for me today. Can you imagine the difference in the scale of the competition? Plus, no one was singing along. I had that inspirational example in my mind today too, and their incredible support from the audience was palpable. Kelly was ecstatic. Challenging her rival to a meeting was originally just to find out her secret. Now she decided to become her friend. Adriana accepted the offer to socialize. They exchanged what they knew and even came up with a few dance routines. For the performance at the Parents' Day, The girls came up with a small number and thwarted a flurry of applause. Upon returning to the city, the girlfriends continued to socialize. Kelly even went to study in the studio, where Adriana practiced. As they grew up slim, young, perfectly dancing beauties invariably attracted attention at discos. The girls together entered the Institute of Culture and managed to reach the equator. When the happy, quiet life of Adriana collapsed overnight, her parents died in the family car. As soon as they drove a little away from the parking lot at the mall, the car flew into the air. Doctors were powerless to do anything. The girl was saved only by the fact that she did not feel very well that day and stayed at home. She didn't go shopping with her parents. She lay on the sofa under a warm woolen blanket and drank tea with lemon, trying to overcome her ailments as soon as possible. When Adriana saw her grandmother opening the door of her dead daughter's apartment with her own key, she realized that something irreparable had happened. Miranda hugged her granddaughter and whispered the sad news in her ear. The girl couldn't find her place. It seemed to her that if she had gone with her parents, she would have surely noticed something wrong and prevented the death of her loved ones. She tried not to upset her grandmother, but at times tears dripped from her eyes when something reminded her of her parents. Kelly became a real support for Adriana during that terrible period. She literally moved into Miranda's apartment, where a friend moved after the tragedy. Kelly did not let her grief wither her. She, almost by force, took her to the institute, forced at least something to eat. To the surprise of many neighbors and other people's gossip, the perpetrator involved in the massacre of Adriana's parents managed to detain. And the main merit belonged not to the law enforcement agencies, which, as if someone gave the order, not too active in the search for the criminal. Grandmother spared no money to punish not only the murderer, but also the customer of the massacre of the only adored daughter and son-in-law whom she respected and loved. Miranda sold her jewelry and carefully shielded her granddaughter from the details of the investigation and court cases. She seriously feared for Adriana. After all, her psychological state, even 6 months after the tragedy, was deplorable. As soon as the girl approached the house where the apartment was located, where she lived with her parents, as she began to have hysterics. Adriana could not forgive herself for staying alive. To return to the place where she was once happy, the girl refused flatly. Miranda didn't insist. It wasn't easy for her, and alone, she would probably have lost her mind. Her granddaughter and the punishment of criminals were her anchors to keep her sane. Adriana was holding on in part because of her grandmother, and not without Kelly's help, trying to continue living in her new reality. Her financial situation had taken a noticeable hit, and Miranda, after much deliberation, arranged a home council with her granddaughter. "Girl, I realize that we are going to have a difficult conversation, but I will not make important decisions without you. I know that the apartments are not thrown away, but to rent it to me, frankly sorry. I'm afraid that instead of money, we'll end up with ruin. What do you think?" "Grandma, you're right. It's too hard for me to be there. I couldn't find a normal job yet, and I'm ashamed to sit on your neck." The woman hugged her granddaughter tightly, glad that she did not cry during the short but emotionally heavy conversation, and began to help with the sale of her daughter's apartment. Throughout the tragic, difficult days, as the woman motored around town trying to get justice and dealing with other issues, Kelly supported her friend. She even tried to drag Adriana out to all sorts of recreational activities. It was to no avail. However, Adriana knew that Kelly had met some guy at one of the discos where she couldn't get her out, and now, making sure that her friend was in a relatively normal state, she spent all her free time with him. Adriana had a slip of resentment that it was as if Kelly was hiding her suitor from her. but she realized it all after another serious conversation with her grandmother. Once Miranda, who had aged dramatically after the tragic events, seeing her granddaughter looking sad over her notes, sat down opposite her and looking into her eyes spoke. "My girl, I know that you had to grow up very suddenly, but that's the way fate has it. Anyway, that's not what I wanted to tell you now. It's inevitable that you and Kelly are seeing less of each other. It was bound to happen one day. You can't be around her everywhere, or it's abnormal. You shouldn't be offended that she doesn't introduce you to her boyfriend. It's just quite easily explained. The way the world works is that love is always prioritized over friendship." Adriana objected indignantly. "I'm not going to steal Kelly's boyfriend." Grandmother smiled. "I didn't think so. Kelly probably doesn't suspect you of evil intentions either. But instinctively she's trying to spend more time with her boyfriend and keep you out of his meetings so that his attention isn't dissipated. Men are a windy people. Not all of them, of course, but alas, a great many. So I don't want you to take offense or be too trusting. I didn't tell you, but you have a right to know. Your parents, as it turns out, were massacred by people they considered good friends. Just remember that you can only trust yourself completely, unconditionally, and fully. Be especially careful when you fall in love. Happiness loves silence. The less we brag, the better." Adriana nodded, listening to her grandmother. Everything was falling into place. The resentment against her friend was evaporating like raindrops from hot asphalt. Adriana really carefully memorized all the words of the only native person. The girl had always admired her grandmother, and now she was a little ashamed that she had left her favorite relative unattended. Of course now, having almost reached the desired stop, it was silly to go back. All that remained was to perfectly fulfill her friend's request and get home faster. Scraps of triumphant, sad, and instructive memories managed to rush through Adriana's mind as they drove to the casting. Even before arriving at the venue, the girl's thoughts were interrupted by Kelly's enthusiastic monologue, anticipating success. "Very soon we will get our diploma, and then hello, a new life. Paris will have better prospects than our backwoods town." Adriana thought she was used to her best friend's ambition and spontaneous actions. But Kelly still managed to surprise her, and she objected, standing up for the good name of her hometown. "Kelly, you've got a nerve, calling our town of over 1 million people a backwoods town. That doesn't seem right. Besides, how's your boyfriend gonna feel about it? Something happened that had never happened in our many years of friendship." Kelly was embarrassed to hear such a question, and to avoid answering it, she abruptly turned the conversation to the details of the upcoming performance. As they approached the contest venue, Adriana's misgivings became more and more prevalent. Judging by the fact that the line to the old building of the once former movie theater was thinly snaking almost halfway down the long stop, two things were becoming apparent. First, the competition looks like it's going to be stiff. Second, the casting was not organized in the best way. However, after the girls had been standing for about an hour among the same, eager to become famous in the field of dance, the line suddenly began to move much faster. When Kelly and Adriana finally waited for the moment of their performance, the reason for this sudden acceleration became clear. And barely they had time to perform a couple of movements as the person sitting in the center of the table in the jury shouted, "Well done, just bravo." "Enough. Wait, in the next room. We need to discuss the concept of further development of the duo. There's water, tea, healthy sweets, have a rest. A little later you'll be invited for an interview." Adriana didn't care, because she had agreed only to participate in the very initial stage at the insistence of her stubborn friend. but Kelly's hands were almost trembling. She was afraid to hear that the project did not need a dance duet. Adriana, sensing Kelly's excitement, whispered softly, "I think I've accomplished my mission. Now I can say that I refuse from further participation in the competition. Not to take the place of the girls who dream of getting into the project." Kelly's heart was relieved, and she entered the improvised waiting room with a great mood, provided by the support of her best friend. Before, when the building had been a movie theater, as it had been planned when it was built, it had been a cafe. So the atmosphere was nervous. A pretty middle-aged brown woman, who supervised the distribution of food and kept order, smiled sweetly at the contestants, poured tea and water. She offered candy and something similar to homemade marshmallows. Adriana refused the treat, but Kelly, having politely thanked Evelyn, as it was written on her badge, enjoyed the sweets and tea. Sipping her drink, she hissed to her friend, "What are you so shy about? This Evelyn is here for a reason, I think. She's probably watching and quietly observing which contestants have what kind of character, and whoever's going to be rude to her won't get any further than the qualifying round. Again, look how she looks at everyone carefully, especially if the girls are in a group. In dance groups, you know, like in astronauts, psychological compatibility is important. So she's noticing which group is more promising to form." Adriana marveled. "But you, Kelly, you're a consummate strategist." The girlfriend smiled. I am. I just can't imagine how much I want to get out of here and go to Paris. My parents are always nagging me. Study better, don't stay out late, eat well, or you're almost transparent." She mocked. Adriana kept silent so as not to cry. She was glad to have her mom and dad telling her what to do, and she desperately missed the times when the whole family was together. Fortunately, Adriana's painful conversation was interrupted. An acquaintance from the dance studio came over, and they chatted for a while, reminiscing about the past. The conversation helped to forget a little about the tense situation. The number of contestants in the hall did not decrease, and those who went to the room for the interview were replaced by new ones. Soon, Kelly and Adriana, an old friend of Kelly and Adriana's, were called in for an interview. And next the two of them were called into the room. In the room, sprawled on the couch, half lying, half sitting, was a man who from the first moment made the most unpleasant impression on Adriana. Mannerly from high, though looking at the girls from bottom to top, he, slightly stretching vowels, said, "I am the producer of this project. My name is Michael. I have to admit, honestly, I've been watching you move on the online camera, and it's impressive. You have a great duet, such cohesion, such harmony, and such plasticity. It's like you're moving without tension. I can see that you enjoy your performance, and that's very much appreciated. Anyway, I'm ready to make you a unique offer right now. I'll hire you at a club in the capital. At first, of course, there will be a trial period, but all the tips are yours. You'll have to learn a little bit, of course. We have our own specifics in this establishment, but I think you girls are talented, capable, and will easily cope." Adriana could not contain her surprise. What kind of tips can the members of a dance group have? Kelly, who already had a picture in front of her eyes of being applauded by a huge hall in the capital, suddenly also thought about her friend's quite adequate question. Michael laughed mannerly and explained, emphasizing the age of the contestants. It seems that minors were not allowed to our casting. So where did this naivety come from all of a sudden, or did you decide to break comedy here? Why are you batting your eyelashes? You'll have to dance in a club where the customers are generous and hot. The producer didn't name the job, which she probably was, But Adriana realized she had to get out of that room as quickly as possible. Taking Kelly under her arm, the girl correctly said goodbye. "I'm sorry to have taken up your time, but we have to go." Contrary to fears, not Michael, no one or anyone else was holding the girls back. They quietly walked out of the former movie theater building into the street. The always cheerful Kelly shrank, realizing that she had almost got into a bad story, and Adriana cheered her up. "Don't worry, there'll be more normal auditions. In the meantime, let's get a cab. I'm really worried about Grandma." Kelly, who was feeling awkward, was uncomfortable to refuse, even though she had planned to give herself an extraordinary shopping spree to improve her mood. While the girls were in the cab, Adriana asked, "Kelly, let's not scare my grandmother with the truth about this fake casting. Let's just say it didn't work out. I mean, it's real, and she doesn't need to know the details." "Of course," immediately agreed friend. "I myself do not like to think that I was so easily fooled. You could have checked out the organizer's firm. Okay, I'll be smarter now. Thank you, Adriana, for coming with me." Adriana smiled at her friend, even though she was feeling a little sick to her stomach. She had left her grandmother alone for the sake of this cheating contest, and she would never forgive herself if something bad happened during that time. To the girls' great relief, everything was relatively fine with Miranda. However, the woman promised her granddaughter that she would soon undergo a full examination. "Do not worry, I will pass all the doctors." In the polyclinic at the place of residence, the queue to the cardiologist was scheduled for 3 months in advance. The neurologist was on vacation. There was no endocrinologist at all. In fact, only the therapist, ENT, ophthalmologist, and gynecologist worked. Adriana smiled sadly, remembering Kelly's speech about her hometown, and mentally agreed with her. A polyclinic in the center of town with no doctors almost. At the insistence of her granddaughter, who was worried about her health, Miranda had gone to a private pay clinic. Adriana was adamant. "Let's withdraw the money left from the sale of the apartment, but you will pass the doctors without such a long wait." The woman only had to obey, and her epic with visiting the clinic, taking tests, and undergoing examinations began. Adriana, of course, asked her grandmother about the results, but in the hustle and bustle before graduation, she simply did not have time to study what was stated in the statements. Miranda cheerfully told her granddaughter that all the detected deviations from the norm were just senile changes, which angered Adriana. "Nonsense, you're always young." In fact, Miranda's health was not as rosy as she presented it to her granddaughter. In addition to her diagnosed diabetes mellitus, the cardiologist was concerned about her heart condition. The shallow woman didn't panic and checked the diagnosis elsewhere, then at another clinic. But all the doctors were unanimous. The condition was dangerous and surgery had to be prepared. Miranda diligently followed all the recommendations, and Adriana was happy to note that the feverish blush had disappeared from her grandmother's cheeks. The woman underwent the operation, and it seemed that a new happy period of life was ahead of her. After receiving their diplomas, Adriana and Kelly decided to open their own dance studio, where not only children, but also adults who decided to join dancing could come. The girls staked on an unusual approach. They offered visitors a mix of modern dances, as well as engaged in staging movements of couples to wedding compositions, using an idea from a movie once seen. In addition, Adriana decided that her free time would be spent sewing, learning from her grandmother. And because from the very beginning to promote the studio is not the fastest thing, and an extra penny saved or earned will not hurt. Surprisingly, needlework fascinated the girl, helping to distract from the troubles. Especially since Miranda, was a patient and knowledgeable teacher and was happy to share with her granddaughter all the wisdom of which she knew a lot. After only a few months, justifying the most daring hopes of the owners, the studio became a success. Of course, the net profit was still out of the question, but still, the idea was a success. Adriana was happy that she was doing what she loved, both at home and in the company of her best friend. Most of all warmed the soul of the girl thought that her grandmother now does not have to deal with the financing of their small family alone. Everything was fine for almost a whole year, and then Miranda was suddenly gone. The girl came home and saw her grandmother lying on the couch as if resting. She slowly approached to cover her with a plaid, because the apartment was quite cool, because the central heating had already been turned off and traditionally frost had returned. As soon as the girl came closer, a scream of horror burst out, it seemed, from the very depths of her soul. It was obvious that her grandmother would now no longer be saved from the cold. The excitement she had experienced had proved fatal to Miranda. In the turmoil of saying goodbye to her only relative, Adriana found her outlet in the studio. Dissolving in the movements and carefully watching the dancer, the girl drove away her pain. Kelly, who seemed to have everything fine, tried not to shine with happy eyes, so as not to annoy her friend. She came to visit her less and less often. Adriana was not offended. Who would want to communicate with a sad person? She was disgusted with herself. For a long time going over a piece of cloth, which her grandmother had accumulated quite a lot. It was as if the girl was having a conversation with her favorite relative Adriana. It seemed that only in this way she would be able, if not to forget about the hardtack, then at least to reduce it. One evening, having lost track of time, the girl completely forgot about the rules of safety. When she heard the doorbell ring, for some reason she immediately decided that Kelly, whom she hadn't even seen today, had come to see her. Her friend had warned her that she couldn't make the class because of personal matters and had probably dropped by to tell her something. Eventually, Adriana opened the door without looking through the peephole and was surprised to see an unfamiliar young man with a box of cake in his hands on the doorstep. The girl muttered, "You must be mistaken," and began to close the door. However, the man did not allow her to do so and surprised her with an unexpected revelation. "Hello, Adriana, how mature you are. I see you don't recognize me. Well, I'm not proud. I'll introduce myself. My name is Benjamin. I'm your own grandfather." The girl grinned wickedly, remembering what her mother had told her. "Well, he's more like family. He left Grandma when your daughter went to school, and as far as I know from my mom, he only visited a couple times. So Benjamin, have a nice day and goodbye." The man put his foot on the threshold so that Adriana couldn't slam the door in his face as she intended, even if she wanted to. And in a stern tone that sent shivers down the girl's spine, he said, "You granddaughter do not get hot. The apartment partly belongs to me. I never divorced Miranda. She probably didn't bother with that formality. She didn't file for alimony. So, dear granddaughter, excuse me, move over and let me pass." Stunned Adriana, using all her strength, managed to put on the door chain and shouted to the uninvited guest, "I'm going to call the police now." "Just so you know," the man only smirked. "Call all you want. It's even better that you make sure I'm telling the truth. I'll treat them to cake. I'll tell them that my granddaughter is the only one who won't let me in. I have a specialty cake from my childhood town. I'm sure the cops will love it. I'm just afraid it'll frost a little, so you'd better hurry them up. Tell them it's urgent. Grandpa wants to treat you. Go ahead, I'll wait for you here." The man took his foot off. Adriana slammed the door shut, locked it, and froze in doubt. Really, she would call the police now, and what would they say? Come, because there is a relative unknown to me under my door. He does not threaten, does not attack. Thinking, the girl moved away from the door just in case and dialed her friend's number. Briefly explaining the situation to Kelly, Adriana asked, "Help me out. Your cousin seems to know someone in the police force. Ask him, if it's not too much trouble, what should I do?" "I got it. Don't worry. Give me 10 minutes and wait for my call." Kelly called her excited friend back, even a little before the announced deadline, and happily informed her, "Wait, we'll be there soon, me and backup. You will open the door only after I tell you to, understand?" Adriana gave a sigh of relief. "Thank you, Kelly. I owe you one." The girl tiptoed towards the door to see what was going to happen, and soon she heard the low voices of men. It was hard to make out who was talking about what, and Adriana was cursing herself for insisting on good noise insulation during the renovation. However, she didn't have to suffer for long. There was a knock at the door, and Kelly, parodying a cartoon character, said, "Owl, open up. The bear is here." Then she added in her own voice, "It's okay." Adriana let in her friend, her cousin Kevin, who she knew a little, her grandfather, who had shown up out of nowhere, and a strange man. Kelly introduced him. "Adriana, this is Christopher. He's one of the best lawyers around. He will help you resolve the matter with the least amount of effort." The man bowed his head and spoke in a pleasant baritone. "Although under such unexpected circumstances, it's a pleasure to meet you. If you don't mind, why don't we all sit down at the table? Benjamin will calmly state the essence of his claims, present the documents he has. If it's not too much trouble, Adriana, I'll ask you to prepare the receipts for the rent for the last month or any other month. It's not too important." The lawyer's voice mesmerized the girl. She was even glad of her grandfather's sudden intrusion, because this mishap had led to a pleasant acquaintance. While Adriana went to the other room to get a receipt, Christopher had time to study the passport that the girl's grandfather had given him. He held it out to Kevin. "Look with your own eye. Something marriage stamp looks strange to me." Kelly's cousin, having scrutinized the stamp, began to photograph all the pages of the passport. Benjamin raised an eyebrow in surprise, but did not have time to comment. The lawyer asked him an unexpected question. "What store did you buy the cake from?" The man even stood up, saying, "You can't buy such a thing here. In my hometown, the only bakery in my hometown bakes according to old recipes. I went in yesterday before I left and bought some." Christopher nodded in affirmation. "It seems we are fellow countrymen, Benjamin. Only I haven't been to my native land for about 5 years. Who's behind the cash register at the pastry shop? Same Aunt Camille?" With her eyelashes glued shut and her constant joke in response to complaints about the disorder on the counters. Benjamin nodded. "She is." The lawyer rejoiced as if he had been told the most joyous news. "We must go and see how the deceased woman trades. Yes, jokes about jokes. Tell you what, Benjamin, or whatever your name is, Aunt Camille's been in the ground for 15 years. I doubt you're related to Adriana. Even if you were, according to the receipts she's kindly provided for the last 6 months, you're not even registered here. You have no right to this property, and if you think to sue, only wasting time and money. So my advice to you is to get out of here and don't let Adriana see you again. Otherwise, don't even doubt, I will find an article that will bring you to administrative or even criminal responsibility." The elderly man, upset, grabbed his document with surprising impudence and went to the exit. Adriana shouted after him, "Take the cake back. I don't want anything from you." Benjamin did not resist or refuse and left the apartment, which he had not managed to become a full-fledged tenant. Adriana was overjoyed and agreed to let her rescuers go only after an impromptu feast. She sincerely thanked her friend, her cousin and the lawyer who had so masterfully saved her the trouble, and asked a direct question. "Christopher, please name your fee." The man laughed. "Better just by name. I'm maybe 7 years older, and when people address me by you, I feel like an old man. And I think I've already paid for everything with my home-cooked food and this funny business." Kelly picked up the lawyer's laughter, laughing at the hapless imposter. "Nice work, Christopher. You got him." "Kevin, what did you take passport photos of this scammer for?" A cousin confessed. "Honestly, it was just to be on the level. I thought I'd scare him with it, and I think it worked." When the guests left, Adriana did not think that the strange incident would have a pleasant continuation. However, the next day, Christopher came to her in the morning, brought coffee and a cake from a rather status coffee shop, explaining, "This is as a sign of apology for the fact that yesterday the cake could not be tasted." The girl thanked the lawyer and, feeling a little awkward, offered to have breakfast together. During the conversation at the table, Adriana had the feeling that she had known Christopher all her life and that he understood her from half a word. They even had the same musical tastes, which was not the case even with Kelly, who couldn't stand rock or classical music. Adriana was not even surprised that communication with Christopher had become a necessity for her. A real addiction. Once during another date, the man reluctantly, as if embarrassed, shared with the girl a difficult story of his life. He said that he was married, and after the divorce moved from his hometown to the metropolis where he once studied. "That's how I lived until I met you," worked, rented an apartment near the office, and never thought that I would ever fall in love so much. Adriana's heart melted from the tenderness of Christopher, with whom she felt like behind a stone wall. The girl once offered her favorite man to move in with her, and he agreed, and in confirmation of the seriousness of his intentions, gave a thin ring as an engagement ring and proposed to get married closer to summer. Can you imagine what a beautiful ceremony could be organized? No, winter has its charms too, but it's impossible to organize an extravagant photo shoot in nature. And I want you to remember our wedding day forever. With Kelly, Adriana now saw her almost exclusively at work. One day, entering the tiny office, which they proudly called the coach's room, she found her best friend in tears. "What happened? Did you get hurt? Should I call a cab to the hospital?" Kelly shook her head. "I'm just sad. No one wants me." Adriana marveled. "Come on, I need you." "Don't worry, you have practice in an hour. Everyone will be waiting for you there. Don't be sad." Kelly cried, "You don't even have time to hang out with me now. I have no one to go dancing with, no one to hang out with. I'm so lonely." Adriana tactfully did not ask where the mysterious bow had gone, from which her friend's eyes shone so brightly, and offered her, "You know, let's sit at my place tonight. Christopher said he's gonna be working late. He has to go somewhere. You and me, we'll relax. We'll set up a beauty parlor at home, some masks, peels." The girls were in the middle of a merry conversation when Christopher returned to the apartment. He said hello to Kelly, kissed Adriana, and after thinking about it, invited the girls to an Italian cafe. Since that evening, the man also began to take an active part in making sure that the friend of his beloved did not feel neglected and lonely. On weekends, the groom took the bride and her friend to a country park hotel for a picnic with kebabs, or he rented a cottage at a camp where they could go skiing and snowboarding. Adriana was genuinely glad that her friend had stopped shedding tears. In addition, in business things also went afill. The girls even opened a branch of the studio without hesitation, entrusting all the paperwork to Christopher. Adriana, dreaming that soon her favorite will take her to apply. In advance, she found out the schedule of the wedding building, all the formalities, details, and waited for the fateful day to come. However, the man was alert, affectionate, but although the last spring month has already passed the middle, he did not talk about formalizing the relationship. Probably, Adriana for some time would go, as they say, in rose-colored glasses and did not suspect anything. But one day, during a joint dinner, she had to leave the company of her fiancé and best friend to talk on the phone with the mother of one of the girls engaged in the studio. Returning to the table, Adriana almost caused a scandal when she saw Kelly move to her rightful place, kissing Christopher. The deluded bride had to summon all her self-control to almost calmly report, "So, Christopher, as far as I'm concerned, you're moving in. So give me your set of keys. I'll put your stuff together and let you know when you can pick it up." "Kelly, I want my apartment keys back too." However, the friend was not embarrassed and, rummaging through her purse in a completely calm tone, reported, "Anyway, I'm glad it's all finally cleared up. Yes, Christopher and I are together now, but let's not make a tragedy out of it, okay? I don't want our business to suffer because of any resentment you might have. Be professional, Adriana. I know it's going to be hard for you to see me, so I suggest we stay away from each other temporarily until you cool off. I'm afraid you'll suddenly have steam coming out of your ears." Kelly smiled victoriously, pulling a bunch of keys out of her bag and taking the keys to the apartment off her carabiner. She continued to outline her ideas. "We'll divide the studios like this. The one closer to my house will be on me. You can safely conduct training in the branch. You'll pay the minimum rent, and you can keep half of the profits you make. The rest will be saved up in accounts for future development. I think that's reasonable and fair." Adriana was surprised. "Wait, Kelly, are you kidding me? Why should I have to pay rent and profit? I'm just as much an owner as you are." Christopher tried to calm the girl, who had just not only abandoned, but thanks to her gullibility, deprived of a very significant part of the income. "Don't scandalize. People are already looking at us. Kitten, you gotta understand, it happens. Don't blame yourself. You're a wonderful person, a talented and beautiful girl. You'll be fine. Let's be friends, okay?" Kelly agreed with the man. "Yes, Adriana, let's civilize our relationship under new circumstances. I think you're being overdramatic. Of course, as a dance coach, you're unrivaled, but in business, I'm sorry, you don't know anything. Who signs papers like general powers of attorney and amendments to bylaws without looking? Christopher and I will be running the business. You do what you do best. Show me how to dance." Adriana remembered that she had actually signed a few sheets of paper without even reading, believing only Christopher's oral retelling, and flared up. "So, having actually knocked the ground out from under my feet, having taken away the joy of doing what I love, you're trying to look like a benefactor. Oh, good for you. But you should know that I will not give up. I will study all the documentation very carefully and will not let you wipe your feet on me." Grabbing her purse, Adriana ran home, not looking back at the calls to stop that the traders shouted after her. In the apartment, she ran from room to room, from bathroom to kitchen, grabbed the Christopher things she saw, and threw them on the bed. Then she tied the corners of the bedspread crosswise and hauled the unexpectedly heavy knot to the door to toss it over the threshold. As soon as her ex-fiancé arrived, finished with clearing the apartment of Christopher, Adriana rushed through every piece of paperwork she had at home. The more the deceived girl was immersed in reading, if necessary checking the meaning of terms on the internet, the more she was horrified. How naive she had been, how insanely gullible. How right her grandmother had been in saying that you can't trust anyone unconditionally. Such a blow from Kelly, whom she considered her best friend and fiancé. The girl could not imagine, even in the most nightmarish dream, the power of attorney that Adriana had given Christopher had played a very bad joke. The man, using her boundless trust, legally arranged everything so that the girl, in fact, almost no rights to the studio remained. She was now not the owner, but an ordinary employee and could not even arrange a vacation or set a convenient work schedule without agreement with Kelly. Adriana, of course, could quit even now, but decided to try to work at least a month to prepare the way out, to rent the premises and organize there a new studio, luring the maximum number of clients. Adriana didn't even talk to Christopher, who had come to pick up her things, and as soon as the bundle with his belongings was on the landing, she hurried to close the door. In the adored studio, Adriana now went as a hard labor. And after a week, the flow of clients noticeably decreased. Even regular students and pupils began to refuse from classes. Adriana blamed herself, thinking that the trainings lacked courage and the spark that ignites talent in people who are shy to dance. But one day, one of the first visitors who became a regular opened her eyes to what was going on. It turned out that Kelly brazenly simply lures customers to her hall, not bending any methods. The most harmless lie of her former friend was the allegedly random news that Adriana was going to leave, and therefore she, of course, did not have time for classes. Thanking for the valuable information, the girl said goodbye to the visitors and went to the coach room on unbendable legs. She wanted to take her things quickly and, having reached home, to cheer herself up. However, she decided first of all to write to her former friend that she was quitting, and she immediately fulfilled her intention. The reply message that arrived in the messenger on her phone completely knocked Adriana out of her rut. The picture was a decorated vignette, an invitation to the wedding of Kelly and Christopher, and with a mocking column +1. Before the girl could catch her breath, another message arrived. We really want you not to be mad at us and to share our moment of joy. The uniforms are dressy. Kelly and Christopher. Adriana was in shock. What had she done to humiliate her like this? Why were the people she considered her support now pushing her into the abyss of despair? Had she misjudged them so deeply? The girl did not know what to do, but clearly understood that in such a state alone in any case cannot stay. It is necessary to be somewhere in the middle of people, so that the sinful thought of the most terrible way of solving problems does not get into her head. The girl went to the nearest park. There are a lot of people there, and at the same time no one invades personal space. If Adriana's state of mind could influence nature, the leaden gray sky would be pierced by lightning. People who were going to hide from the weather would have been slapped in the face by prickly rain. Wind gusts would have torn off the roofs of street cabs. Except that everything was almost exactly the opposite. The mood of one poor humiliated girl changed nothing. The sun was shining brightly in the sky, the young greenery on the trees gave a pleasant open-work shade, and the park looked excellent. The unknown florist obviously tried to create a magnificent landscape, and he had done everything with a soul. The park was much cozier than Adriana remembered it, and she sat down on a bench to try to disconnect herself from all the excitement that had nearly brought her to the brink today. She felt like she was performing on stage, and once again the music disappeared. Only this time the girl had no idea what kind of dance she was doing, and in general, what kind of melody was playing. The only thing left to do was to freeze in confusion and desperately try to figure out what to do next. Right in front of the place where the girl had settled down, there was a late variety of proud tulips, which looked, if not the winners in life, then definitely the masters of the flower beds. I wish I had their self-confidence, Adriana thought. Her thoughts were suddenly interrupted by a man's voice. "Hey, why are you crying?" Adriana, who didn't notice she was crying, wasn't going to talk to anyone and didn't answer the curious stranger. He left, but soon returned and sat down next to the sad Adriana. The stranger had an ice cream cone and a fluffy cloud of cotton candy in each hand. The man began to patiently explain to stop the girl, who was about to jump up and run away from him. "Don't be scared, Adriana. But it just so happens that I know you, even though we don't know each other. I work for a private investigator who was commissioned by your grandmother to work on solving your parents' elimination. Since we seriously feared that the villains would use any means to obstruct justice. So I was assigned by my boss to keep a discreet eye on you. So you could say that you have been my ward for several months." The girl took a closer look at the man. He might have glimpsed her once, but she couldn't be sure of that. The stranger, smiling, introduced himself. John, an employee of the secret private agency. After introductions, the man handed Adriana both a cone and cotton candy, explaining, "They said in the movies that ice cream seemed to make you feel more cheerful, but I thought it was unlikely you had a sore throat, so I got you some cotton candy. I, for one, love cotton candy." Adriana was in a foul mood, and she answered John not very kindly. "You can enjoy it. I try not to eat any of those types of sweets." The man smiled. "Well, no, so no. Really, I can't eat that much myself. Wait now, I'll treat those boys who are counting change at the kiosk, and I'll be back." I don't know why, but Adriana obeyed and waited for John. The assistant detective asked, "You can consider it a professional interest, and if you're uncomfortable, you don't have to answer, but I'll ask you why you're crying on such a beautiful day in this beautiful park." Adriana grinned and decided to share her distress. It might have been a lovely day if it hadn't been for one thing. Today, 2 traitors have taken to inviting me to a wedding. My ex-fiancé is going. What was it called? To solemnize my marriage to my ex-best friend, and it's a mock invitation for 2 people. They know I don't have anyone to go with. They're mocking me. It was as if the man knew exactly the unmistakable path to her heart. He even used a perfume exactly the way she liked, with a top note, lemon, and a persistent trail of vetiver. Not an obvious choice for a serious, successful lawyer, as Christopher seemed to be. In addition, several times Adriana noticed that he contemptuously wrinkled his nose when she danced to the tune of his favorite band, although he claimed to adore their work. When asked why the man's grimaces flickered on his face, Adriana, as it seemed to Adriana at the time, answered about a sudden colic or a headache. Closely examining her memories of the recent past, the jilted bride discovered more and more oddities. Coming home, Adriana was already convinced that Christopher, having previously learned as much information about her as possible, did everything to gain her trust and settle in her apartment as a fiancé. Admittedly, he had succeeded with ease, but what was his goal? Adriana kept no cash in the apartment. A sewing machine, fabrics, leftovers from the family jewelry collection. That's all the valuables the girl had. Driven by an unaccountable fear, Adriana checked the stash. A pair of antique earrings and a ring were in place. The girl calmed down a little, but the next morning, taking the jewelry, went to the bank to put them in a safe deposit box. After all, she had no guarantee that Christopher had not acquired a duplicate key. Besides, Kelly could have done it too. After visiting the bank, The girl planned to call a locksmith to change the lock, just in case. So, after signing the safe deposit box agreement and placing the jewelry in it, she decided to withdraw the accumulated interest from the account in order to have cash on hand. However, an employee of the financial institution shocked Adriana with the news. "I'm sorry, but according to your power of attorney, all the funds were withdrawn from the account yesterday." Trying not to shout, Adriana clarified, "Can you tell me who I gave the power of attorney to? Can you look at it?" The employee did not refuse the strange client and gave a name that Adriana did not expect to hear. The money from the account was taken not by Christopher, as the girl supposed, but by her former best friend. Thanking the operator, who asked if everything was all right, Adriana went home. It was suddenly clear to her as daylight that it was Kelly who could so accurately orient Christopher about all her likes and dislikes. It wasn't enough that her best friend didn't know about naive Adriana. It was at her behest and at her instigation that the man managed to appear in the image of an ideal. She believed in incredible harmony and love at first sight. Now there was a lot of explanation. And the fact that Kelly had pressed her pity, cursing her loneliness, was also part of the plan. Surely in inviting her to the wedding, the traitors must have been up to something devious too. Perhaps someone would be involved in the robbery of the apartment, while Adriana, swallowing tears, would say congratulations. After all, her friend knew for a fact that she still had her jewelry, only that she never told her where the stash was located in the house. Adriana did not go to the police about the theft of money. After all, Kelly technically had power of attorney, and there was no doubt that it was quite real signed. The master replaced the lock in the door, and the girl felt a little calmer. However, she couldn't relax completely. Deciding to take advantage of the insomnia for her own good, Adriana began to think about an outfit to make a spectacular appearance at the wedding of the people who had so despicably betrayed her trust. Barely waiting for working hours, the girl appeared in the office of the agency's secret. Following the clues, sitting near the turnstile guard, she found the door, on which hung a sign with the name of a recent acquaintance, and knocked and entered. Before John told the girl the information he had gotten, she confessed, "You know, I guess you were right. Christopher was instructed by my best friend. She took money out of my account by proxy, by the way. But it was my fault. I signed every piece of paper my fiancé gave me. Yeah, I was able to talk to Kelly's cousin Kevin. He's probably the most innocent element in this scheme. In my opinion, he was used. He's a big guy, and his main task was to scare the guy who introduced himself as your grandfather." Catching the surprise on Adriana's face, John explained, "It was a well-thought-out production. Kelly, as I understand it, knew the basic information about your family. Christopher had found an actor to play Benjamin. You'd only seen your grandfather in old photographs when he was young, and there was no fear of exposure. The crooks wanted to get rich, and as I understand it, they almost succeeded. I think they didn't invite you to the wedding just to make fun of you, but with the same vested interest. You caught them unexpectedly, and he just didn't have time to bring the search of your apartment to its logical conclusion." Adriana nodded. "I've come to roughly the same conclusion. I just have a few questions bouncing around in my head. Why would my best friend, the one who'd been there for me in my most difficult moments, suddenly decide to betray me? Why would she treat me this way? It's not like we've never even had a serious fight." John speculated, maybe banal envy or greed. Those are usually the main motives behind most crimes. Adriana's face even stretched a little in surprise. "Originally, my family wasn't much richer than Kelly's, so it's definitely not greed. And as for envy, it wasn't her envy of me, It was my friend's envy from the moment my parents died that drove me crazy. Imagine Kelly being able to play checkers with her dad, hug her mom, and have secret chats with her. I was overcome with envy. What can I say? I still get that feeling now. Maybe she's getting back at me for being jealous. I don't think so. Anyway, I don't know what to think. I'm in a lot of pain right now with everything that's going on. One thing I know for sure, I will definitely go to the wedding to these traitors, if only to look at Christopher and Kelly to clarify why they did such a despicable thing to me. The assistant detective, he explained. Christopher's motives are pretty clear. He was driven by greed. He has so much debt in his hometown that he's got to call the shots. Lawyer, he is quite mediocre, but his habits are such that the average fees cannot provide. He had addictions too. He got out of town by swindling several ladies out of large sums of money. Ostensibly going to get married, took money under plausible pretexts and quarreled. He was treated in a private clinic in our city, giving doctors for his rehabilitation almost everything he had from knave girls was. Now you're back on the trail of the fortune hunter. Don't worry, we'll fight to get you back your dance studio and your money. But don't make a big deal out of it just yet. Christopher and Kelly might just run away, and I'd like to see them get a fair shake. Adriana began to thank the man. John sighed. I've been able to find so much information on Christopher these days. It's amazing. He seems to be far from stupid. In terms of all sorts of not quite honest methods, a real master, but apparently overconfident and too much. Do you want me to tell you right now all the machinations he's pulled off in our town? Or you'd better wait, and then you'll see everything at the wedding. Though Adriana wanted to know everything at once, she answered after a moment's thought. I think I'll wait. I don't want to get deeper into this mess right now. I've had enough of what I've learned so far. There's only 2 problems left. What to wear and who to go with. I'm working on the first one, but I don't know what to do about the second. John, why don't you keep me company? Don't think I'll pay for the escort, because it's a separate job. The man shook his head negatively. No, I'm not suitable for a spectacular appearance. My appearance is standard, unremarkable, to be honest. Well, you'll come with me on your arm and what? Your detractors will enjoy the first moment. They'll think something like, didn't you manage to persuade anyone better? If you're gonna take a swing at them, you gotta hit them hard enough to make their mood go away. Listen, I think I know just the guy for your date. If it works out, that'd be great. And if it doesn't, I'll keep you company, of course. It may not be the most stunning exit, but I'll give you some great information. Adriana agreed with John that they would meet half an hour before the time specified in the invitation to the wedding and agreed on the place. After saying goodbye, the girl went to the needlework store to buy accessories for the planned outfit. She had only 2 weeks left to create a stunning dress. Not the smallest amount of time, but the idea wasn't too simple either. Adriana was nervous and had stabbed her fingers with a needle several times, sweeping the details until they bled. In order not to cry from resentment and pain, the girl remembered her grandmother's words that the things sown with such incidents will turn out perfectly. She didn't have to rush to work, and she missed her classes, but she wasn't going to bow to Kelly and ask to go back. Adriana was warmed by the thought that it was likely that the studio would soon be in her possession again, although her gullibility was already failing her. The girl trusted that John would be honest with her. On the day of Christopher and Kelly's wedding, Adriana looked truly dazzling. She looked like a flame of flame both in color and with muddy associations. The top of the dress was adorned with a bold, asymmetrical neckline. The skirt, with its high slits at the seams, swayed playfully as she walked, revealing nothing too much, but perfectly stirring her imagination. Adriana herself knew she was irresistible in this dress, but John's praise was gratifying to her. By his quite ordinary clothes, the girl realized that her companion would be someone else. And she was incredibly surprised when the man who had once tried to impersonate her grandfather approached her and the assistant detective. He embarrassingly introduced himself. James, an unemployed provincial theater actor. Well, necessity forced me to play the part of a confidence trickster. Pardon me for deceiving you, if you can. Adriana's heart was pounding as before an important performance, but she took James by the arm and walked with him to the restaurant rented by the traders. At the entrance, Kelly's parents suddenly met her and her companion, who greeted their daughter's friend very warmly and looked at her companion with undisguised interest. The bride's mother cordially invited, "Oh, Adriana, how glad I am that you have come. Come in there, almost everyone is already assembled. Have fun, relax, be happy for Kelly and her fiancé. Such a fine man. I hope you get lucky one day, you deserve it." Adriana was having a hard time with this conversation, and as if sensing this, her companion squeezed her hand a little harder. Kelly's father admired the way his daughter's friend looked, receiving as a reward a disgruntled look from his wife who dragged him along. "Have you forgotten? Where did the steward direct us? Come quickly, I'll see you, Adriana." Almost at a run, the woman dragged her husband along with her. When Adriana and James crossed the threshold of the banquet hall, the girl noted with satisfaction that Kelly and Christopher were frozen like statues when they saw the guests. The bride and groom did not look happy at all now. Somehow, having mastered their emotions, they waved to Adriana and her companion. Kelly reached for the groom's ear. She asked, "What's that alcoholic doing here? You said he'd get the money he was owed and go someplace where no one could find him." "Christopher, I'm scared. I'm afraid that Adriana has thought of some terrible revenge." Christopher hugged his fiancée, pressed her against him, and answered, "I don't think she's got anything serious on us. It's just a similar person." Adriana has a good visual memory, and she probably guessed that Grandpa didn't show up on her doorstep by accident, but that I would have gotten to her quickly and without suspicion. So she decided to annoy us. You might say, to poison the joy of our happy day. She thought about it, reconstructed what this supposed Benjamin looked like, and hired someone. There are plenty of actors in this country who dream of an easy way to make money. So relax, Kelly. Adriana and her companion tried to behave as if nothing had happened and not to stand out among the other guests, either by excessive joy or even more so by frowning. Thanks to the lady hostess, they found their table almost instantly and sat down quietly, waiting for the start of the party, which promised to be very unusual. Adriana was pleased to note how anxiously Kelly looked at her, and meeting her gaze, smiled as happily as possible. She had absolutely no idea what kind of surprise John had prepared, and was excited about the promised surprise. At the signal of the host, Kelly's parents brought a huge loaf into the banquet hall, and the fun began in full swing. Guests congratulated the newlyweds, who can do what they want. The bride's parents sang a duet song. The aunt on the groom's side organized a long presentation of small souvenirs to rhyming lines. Adriana was getting more and more anxious, but James reassured her. And when the hostess announced their turn to congratulate the newlyweds, the man whispered quietly, "Well, Adriana, here we go. Leave it to me to speak, and you listen. Be glad that in time about the real essence of the former fiancé learned." Coughing dramatically, Adriana's companion, carefully supporting her, took a seat in the middle of the hall. The experienced actor didn't even need a microphone. His well-practiced voice, surprisingly, without losing its sonority after years of libations, was heard in all corners of the hall. So, ladies and gentlemen, madam and monsieur, I suggest we turn our attention to the screen. The hostess turned off several rows of lamps, and the room became much darker. Suddenly, to the sound of Mendelssohn's March, racy images showing the groom with other women began to appear on the screen. And James accompanied the changing images with brief information about the names of the groom's lovers. When he came to his senses, Christopher tried to shout out the unexpected guest and convince everyone else that the image on the screen was a photomontage. But a seed of doubt had been sown. Kelly, it seems, was completely unaware of such an amorous nature of her fiancé. And after the photo of Christopher in the company of Adriana flashed shots with herself. And then the unusual movie continued with the participation of other ladies. Kelly slapped her fiancé and started yelling at him, not embarrassed by those present. "Asshole, you told me we'd cheat on my Adriana and live happily ever after. You got me to help you take the dance studio away from her. And you're telling me you were only seeing me for profit. Why didn't I think to follow you? You decided to get married. Then what were your plans? To run away with the money you gave me and take over my business? I hate you." Finally, the demonstration of the unfaithful Christopher on the screen came to an end. The lights came on and John entered the hall accompanied by police officers, explaining, "Unfortunately, the festivities will have to come to an end. The main culprits of the celebration are suspected of fraud." Kelly's parents rushed to the law enforcement officers who explained that there had been a mistake, but the police were adamant. Christopher and Kelly were handcuffed and led to the exit. As the ex-girlfriend approached Adriana, the girl asked the question that had been on her mind. "Why did you do this to me? I always thought you were someone I could trust." Kelly groaned and said, "You always got everything without a problem. First places, inheritance, even the students are drawn to you, not me." Adriana was shocked. She tried to figure out if Kelly was being sincere. Had she almost ruined her life really because of jealousy, as John had suggested? Kelly spat angrily and confessed, "You've always been the best, ever since sports camp, and I've been a pale semblance of you. You know what I'm gonna tell you? I hate you. Ever since I saw you dancing. If you must know, I'm the one who tried to ruin your performance. I'm the reason the music stopped playing during your dance, but it all turned out to your advantage." Kelly paid no attention to anyone around her and looking into Adriana's eyes informed, "The only times I've ever been really happy. Do you know which ones?" Adriana remained silent, afraid to even speculate, and Kelly grinned crookedly and continued, "I was ready to jump for joy when you were suffering. Oh, it wasn't easy to hide my joy, to act sympathetic." Kelly tried to throw herself at Adriana, but it was not easy to do it in handcuffs. The police officers led the detainee away. Adriana remained standing in the middle of the hall. She had yet to face her ex-fiancé, but he passed by with a glance at her neckline. Adriana asked after him, "Christopher, aren't you ashamed?" But the man didn't even turn around. John, who approached Adriana, said softly, "Such people are not ashamed." At the request of Kelly's parents, Adriana did not claim the money withdrawn from her account, and the compensation received in the amount of this amount invested in the development of her network of dance studios. The situation with her ex-girlfriend and ex-fiancé was a great life lesson for her, and she was distrustful of the idea of dating that John had expressed. An assistant private detective, it took about 3 years for Adriana to finally believe in the sincerity of his feelings.